Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to Commissioner Sullivan's presentation of Governor Hochul's executive budget, a very exciting budget we look forward to sharing with all of you. My name is Erica Vanderwall, Planning Director for the Office of Mental Health. We're going to start today with a presentation from the Commissioner, and then we will save some time at the end for questions that you may have. I just want to share with everyone to ask a question, please use the chat box in the WebEx menu, and please select Submit Question to all panelists. That way, all of our panelists that are here today will see your questions as they come in. Slides will be sent to all of you after today's webinar, so you will receive these slides. So let's begin with introductions of the panelists. Commissioner?
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Sullivan, Commissioner, New York State Office of Mental Health.
Ben?
Tracy? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Ben Rosen. I'm Executive Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Mental Health. Tracy?
Hi, Tracy Wilson. I'm Chief of Staff. Bob?
Bob Moon, Deputy Commissioner over Community Programs and Managed Care Policy. April?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is April Wojciechowicz. I'm the Director of Community Budget here at the Office of Mental Health.
So welcome again, everyone, to a presentation on the governor's budget. The first thing I just want to do, though, is thank all of you who are here today for what you do in mental health and for your commitment to the people we serve. Thank you for what you do each and every day. I think that while we have a ways to go, we have quite a mental health system in New York, which I'm going to go through with you, and this incredible support of our governor to expand, transform, and make that mental health system better each and every day. So I'm going to go through, first part of this is really an overall view of the budget. And I think it will talk about some things that don't seem quite directly related to mental health all the time, but do speak to the importance that this governor places on family, on community, and on making sure that all New Yorkers stay healthy. And then towards the end, I will go through again some of the accomplishments over the past couple of years with the incredible transformation dollars that this governor has given to us, and then about this current budget, and then end with a little bit of what we are doing to deal with some of the challenges in the future, mainly those challenges that have been caused by some of the changes at the federal level. So that's the kind of schema of where I'm going to be. I'm going to try now to get my slides to work. I had a practice session, so let me see that I can do this, if I can get this to work. Here we go. Okay. So I think this is, everyone I hope can see. You know, this is the slide deck that the governor uses often to present her budget. And I think what's so telling is that first line, which is your family. I don't know how often that's the major lead-in from a governor on what's really important. And we know at mental health how important family is. So as I go through some of the bones of the rest of the budget, which don't directly affect mental health, I think you can get an idea of how it all intertwines in terms of keeping individuals across New York State healthy and families healthy, and families ready to face the future. So there are four big buckets here. First is keeping New Yorkers safe. I'm going to talk a little bit about the gun laws, about expanded mental health access. You'll hear a lot about that, and about the dollars that have been invested in law enforcement. There's also delivering for parents and kids, and that includes a tremendous investment in childcare. And you've probably seen this all over the news. This is not a minor investment. There's no state that is taking on in this way a kind of universal childcare and beginning that road towards universal childcare with a lot of robust programs and robust funding. And then putting money in people's pockets so that people don't feel stretched and they're not stressed all the time about how to pay the bills or whether there's enough money to meet next month's expenses. And that includes things like the minimum wage and creating jobs and middle-class tax reductions, which began a couple of years ago and are now coming into fruition. And then lastly, an overall approach of fiscal responsibility, because just as we do in mental health and in all the agencies we run and all the services we provide, you have to be sure you have the money to do what you want to do. And this is very important to the governor, and I think threads throughout the approach throughout our planning for the future of New York. We have the highest reserves of any administration. There are $14.6 billion in reserves for New York State. That's pretty healthy. That puts a lot of money that is there in the bank that can be used in case of an emergency. So straight from the governor, that our future depends on the ability of every family to afford the essentials of life and the ability to protect the safety and security of our residents. So the executive budget is $260 billion. That's a huge budget. One of the big hits to the budget is the federal funding, which has decreased this year of about $10 billion. That's significant. About $3 billion of that is Medicaid. And that's where some of the concerns come for us in terms of being able to supplant, getting that money back into the system. And that's one of the initiatives of the governor to try to ensure that people get as much coverage as possible in New York State. And that $3 billion has to be made up somewhere. So state operating funds are up a little bit, 157 billion. And we are in fairly good shape from the revenue for the next 2 years. For the 2 years, it's a total of 17 billion more than was expected in revenue, which helps with that $3 billion Medicaid cost and that $10 billion hit from the federal government. So there has to be some very careful work here in terms of ensuring that the state stays healthy. But one of the priorities is to ensure that that health coverage, that Medicaid is there for the individuals that need it. Universal child care. This is a huge investment on the part of the governor and on the part of the counties that will be involved. There's a huge investment in this in New York City in child care. So there's been over 4.5 billion total statewide investment in child care, 1.7 billion new this year, over 3 billion in child care vouchers, pilots in upstate New York and in several counties to begin really early child care from 0 through 3, 4, 5. And then $500 million for 2 years in New York City's 2Care program. So what does this mean? It means that New York is really pushing towards universal child care. It will take a while. It will take a while. But for those of you who have kids, me, it's my grandkids, you know that child care can cost up to $20,000 a year at this point in New York State. That is huge. And it stresses families and it stretches the ability, it decreases the workforce because people can't work because it's important for them to be home because they can't afford childcare. It would be a great draw to New York State if New York State had universal childcare to bring businesses, to bring people to live here. So basically, this is a major, major initiative. And if successful, can offer the opportunity to relieve that tremendous stress that families often face. And do I work? Do I have childcare? How do I make ends meet? Putting more money in our pockets. Again, child care, dependent care. This is a tax credit. The governor over the past several years has been increasing that tax credit. And that tax credit this year will increase by an additional $575 for a whole bunch of families in New York. Again, helping families with kids to be able to do what they need to do in the state. Estimates the state income, eliminates the state income tax on tipped wages, up to $25,000 a year for people earning individually. I think it's about $150,000. Then you can get $25,000 up in tips that you will not be taxed for. Some common sense reform to state policies that stifle development and unnecessary costs. You know, one of the things we deal with a lot in mental health is the issue of trying to put up housing and being concerned about how we can get that housing into certain neighborhoods, that there's still some discrimination, some difficulties sometimes citing some of the great services that we have. Well, it's not just our housing, it's housing across the board as well. And so the governor is working on certain processes that certain areas have used to slow down in the increase in affordable housing. There's something called the State Quality Environmental Review, which is a good thing because you want to make sure that whatever you build is environmentally stable, but it has been used to prolong, sometimes for many, many years, approvals for housing that would be really quite environmentally safe. So there's going to be some adjustments to some of those processes to enable affordable housing to move forward. And then legislation aimed at tackling rising home insurance costs. Again, something which is very important across the state. Keeping New Yorkers safe, another major priority of the governor. And here there's been, again, a huge investment. You know, our communities, and we all know this because we work with the victims of trauma, violence, of individuals. Many of our youth grow up in some communities and they hear gunshots. And they live with the trauma of the anxiety about what that means for them and for their families. The $352 million in gun prevention isn't just fighting, getting guns off the streets, although that's a big part of it. It's also working with communities to come together to prevent the trauma of violence on our streets. So that's a huge investment that the governor has had over the years. $77 million for safety efforts in the subway. This is largely police paying the New York City Police Department to do extra patrols throughout the subway system, and also putting up some of those safe barriers you sometimes see on the news. Again, a concern to make sure that individuals feel comfortable in one of the largest transit systems in the world, going into that transit system and feel safe. And the governor has partnered with the city in a very effective way. Subway crime is down significantly. Crime across New York State is down. Shootings are down. Down doesn't mean perfect by any means, but it does mean that all these efforts are having an impact, and they continue to have an impact. There's also dollars for what they call technical grants, especially through rest of state in areas that need criminal investigation procedures that can help law enforcement. And then hate crimes grants, and this is money to help to increase security for organizations and places where there is concern that hate crimes could occur. And that's very important, that people feel safe when they're exercising their rights across New York State. And this is a big one, which is legislation to crack down on those 3D printed firearms. This is legislation that would say that you are not allowed to have a printer that could print 3D printed firearms in New York State. It would make it illegal. This has been something that law enforcement has been trying to deal with, and it gets increasingly difficult. So this would be a really big move. The first state to say you can't have printers. You can't have them. They just can't have them in New York State. You're not allowed to. And that would hopefully begin to check this issue of the 3D printed firearms. You know, firearms are problems for, you know, violence to others, but the indiscriminate availability of firearms also affects suicide rates across the nation. And New York State is very proud in some ways of having although every life lost is a tragedy, we do have across the nation with the second lowest in terms of loss of life by suicide. Part of that is gun control, is not having guns as available, because the largest instrument used across the nation for individuals who die by suicide is gun. So it has multiple effects to be able to really get guns off the streets. Education. We know that the second biggest part of the budget is Medicaid, and there's education. And education is a huge investment on the part of the state. And these are the dollars over the past several years since the governor's been in office. The governor has truly significantly increased the funding to our schools. Something in particular called the education foundation funding. Foundation funding is a formula that says this is what schools need. And in the past, governors never fully funded by that formula. This governor has. So our schools are really getting a significant amount of dollars, but they're also getting it on a formula that speaks to the need of the aid across the state. So there's increase in school aid, increase in the foundation aid, mayoral control in New York City for 4 years. This is a very important issue for New York City, and work to deal with the, you know, back to basics in math and high impact, working to again make our schools stronger. This is a big issue, to be able to have free school meals across the state. This is a huge investment. It means healthier kids. It also means the loss of that stigma. You know, when there used to be a program where basically, you know, some kids got had to go on a separate line because they were on special food vouchers. kind of highlighting that maybe those individuals had, maybe some of those individuals' families couldn't afford to pay for school lunches. That's a bad, not a good thing to have kids involved. So basically, this means that every child gets free meals in school and ensures a kind of healthy diet for them every day. That's incredible. And again, a major, major investment on the part of the governor. Housing. You know, when you think about the social determinants of health, you know, we always talk about mental health supportive housing, but housing across the board is critical. If you don't have a safe home, if you don't have a real home to live in, you know, the homeless, and many of the people in the homeless shelters don't have mental illness. They just can't afford housing. They can't afford the housing because they don't have affordable housing in their neighborhoods. So this is building. This is an incredible effort on the part of the governor. For the past 5-year plan, $25 billion in housing. The plan was to build 100,000 units or refurbish for 100,000 units of affordable housing. 77,000 units have already been built or are there. That's incredible. So we're getting to that 5-year plan of that 25 billion. This year, in this year's budget, there's another 250 million to accelerate the new construction, so more of it can happen. There's also some dollars for resilience and ready programs for flood mitigation. Flooding in areas of New York State is a major issue. And if you're going to have a home that's in a dangerous area like that, then you need assistance in paying for mitigation efforts. And then the Homeless and Housing Assistance Program, this is OTDA, Office of Temporary Disabilities. And these are dollars that are often used for help people for emergency rent payments and emergency repairs that maybe need to keep people in their homes so they don't lose their homes. Again, $153 million investment, and that was increased by 25 million this year by the governor. So again, a place to live, a place for a family to call home, a place for individuals to feel safe. It's all critical and a significant part of the budget. These are the prefab houses. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to see these, but they are really quite impressive. They're in many ways, much cheaper to build. They're built much more rapidly, and they're really quite lovely. So I've had some friends who've been in prefab, I couldn't call them prefab, but in starter homes built a fraction of the time at nearly half the cost. These are factory built homes. They're really $100 million to help move that so it can be a more rapid housing access. And then, you know, I'm not going to go through all the environmental things that the governor supports, including so much clean energy. So much has been done over the past years in terms of making New York a green state and making New York one of the leaders in terms of making climate control, et cetera. But one thing that you do have to emphasize a lot is clean water. We don't think about it a lot because we turn on the faucet and it's there, but it is critical that the state invest. It's one of those critical infrastructure pieces. And there's a huge investment on clean water, and you need clean water if you're going to be building houses, because if you need sewer systems, you need all the things that can enable you to build those houses. So clean water, environmental, and just clean water is just one example of the governor's commitment to the environment and the $3 billion 5-year commitment. Tons of other things that are being done to keep our climate safe, keep us safe in climate change. Protecting fundamental rights. You know, Planned Parenthood is under attack. So the governor has put up the 35 million to ensure the continuity of funding. Also, what's in the mental health budget is dollars for to enable us to have a crisis line for LGBTQ, and that crisis line was cut off by the feds out of 988. And that's very exciting. That's the support for us to develop and have that crisis line separate for LGBTQ youth, and also to train our counselors. So the governor, and in many other ways, the governor is supporting rights throughout the state. At any time there's an infringement on the rights, there are lawsuits, we go to court. And basically we are preserving the rights for every New Yorker to for healthcare, to make their own choices, and for them to be protected from some of the things which sadly are being promulgated by the federal government. And then now youth mental health. And this is where I'm going to get into the mental health side of the budget and start to talk a bit more about what's happening across the board on mental health. But the big one in this year's mental health budget is teen mental health first aid. I particularly like this one because I think teen mental health first aid, if you can think about it for a minute, having teen mental health first aid in sophomore, in 3 years, it should be in every sophomore class across New York State, is it's a game changer in the way people think about mental health issues, and a whole generation and continuing generations that will graduate high school with a different attitude, hopefully, towards mental health issues, that they will see mental health as they see physical health, and that they will not feel ashamed to ask for help, that they will understand when it's important to ask for help, and they will transmit that to their children and to future generations. I think this will have a huge impact on stigma, on the discrimination against mental health, and the misunderstanding that has led to some of the not in my neighborhood that we see as we try to expand services. So this is incredibly exciting. And, you know, when Governor, I've said this before, but when the governor did her interviews across the state with youth, the youth said they wanted 3 things. They said they wanted to be able to have school-based services, and we are clearly expanding our school-based services in a tremendous way. They said they wanted to be able to have safe places where they could have activities that are normal, but also get mental health assistance if they needed it. And that's been the expansion of safe spaces in the budget, which I'll be talking about in a minute, to 10 across New York State now, safe spaces for youth. And the third thing they said is they wanted to know how to talk to each other about mental health. And that's this massive expansion of teen mental health. So these are the requests that came from the youth themselves. And the governor listened and the governor heard. And as we've been building out budgets over the years, more and more is available. And now teen mental health first aid. So this I am not going to go into in detail because I've done it so many times that I think most of you have heard this. But I do just want to mention that this year's budget builds upon 3 years before of intensive services and budgets which have been available. Things on prevention. You know, the emphasis on prevention is relatively new in the Office of Mental Health. We always were concerned with services, but we weren't as involved in prevention. And if you begin to think about it, you got to begin with prevention. You have to have a robust prevention program. So we've been emphasizing healthy steps in pediatric offices, tons of prevention in our schools, suicide prevention across the board. And this governor has supported prevention. Prevention sometimes doesn't come across as fancy as other things, but it's so critical. And so these investments in prevention across the state have been incredibly important and are continuing to grow. I've been through all of these with you before, so I won't go through it in detail, but prevention is critical for ever going to really have the impact on mental health across the state. Then there's investments in access. This is one of the governor's major priorities, is that everybody has access to the care that they need, especially mental health, behavioral health services. One of the big things here is the expansion of our community behavioral health centers. You know, we got that a couple of years ago in the budget, and it's all out there. We have been expanding. We've gone through round 3, and the community behavioral health center awards have been made. That's incredible. That's tripled the community behavioral health centers and the availability of those intensive services. We've significantly increased ACT teams. In parts of the state, we don't have any waiting list anymore for ACT teams. In some parts of the states, we still do, because some of these teams are still coming up and we're adding other teams, but we're working on that. We're trying to get so that when someone needs intensive services, they can get them. The expansion of the INSET teams has been incredibly effective. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on. And then there's loan repayments for adults, loan repayments for people in adult services, loan repayments for people in children's services. That's helped to build our workforce. So expanding capacity, but also being concerned about the workforce and being concerned about, for example, we're having a mental health associate, which will be within a year, will be out there on the streets, which we're really excited about. Access to care, though, also means you have access to your insurance. And this is major insurance reforms across the state. And this has meant that our clinics get paid at least at the Medicaid rate. And then there's the expansion of saying basically that 10 days you should get a mental health appointment. And I know this is in place. We're gathering data to see whether it's really happening. And we are looking very closely at monitoring this to make sure that it's real. And also that the network adequacy. That when you go to your insurer and you say, I need mental health services, that those books that have all kinds of people in them, that those networks are accurate and that they're complete. And that's really, really important. So this insurance reforms build into the infrastructure of what's necessary to make sure that you really have access to care. And we partnered with the Department of Financial Services, who's done a great job at coming forward with a whole campaign, which you're going to see a lot of very soon, that's talking about access to behavioral health services. This is focused on the 10-day appointments and network advocacy. So this is going to go out to all New Yorkers. And if you don't have access within 10 days, or it's going to tell you how to complain, how to get it, how to get forward so that we can make sure that this is really happening. So this is very exciting, because what the governor did, in addition to passing the legislation and to passing the changes and the regulations, she gave us money to make sure it happens. And this is one of the pieces, and this is a campaign to let all New Yorkers know what they're really entitled to, and then we will back it up to make sure that they get what they need. And investments in complex care, again, I'm not going to go through all this, but a huge investment in working with our hospitals. What so many of the providers have brought to our attention over the years is this issue of individuals going to emergency rooms, but sometimes not getting the kind of comprehensive discharge planning that they need. Or if leaving the hospital, ensuring that they get all the wraparound services, because being admitted to a hospital is a huge issue. Individuals they have to leave with all the supports that they need. So building these kind of complex care systems, which make sure that you can get the intensive care when you need it, you can get the housing when you need it, you can get the wraparound services. And while we're not there yet, everything on this list builds towards that and gets us closer and closer to being able to provide those services for individuals who are in severe crisis. Very exciting over the past several years. So just to keep in mind that some of the services over the past few years clearly out there, but these are upcoming procurements which are out there, which are happening for clubhouses, for safe spaces, the comprehensive psychiatric emergency programs, and the next round of the loan repayment program. That's going to be ongoing. That's very exciting. You know, the loan repayment program, in total now almost 1,600 individuals have participated in the loan repayment program, meaning that they will now be working in our system for 3 years. That's incredible. And that includes several hundred nurse practitioners, several hundred psychiatrists, and almost 1,000 psychologists, social workers, counselors who are now in the system, working in the system with on loan repayment. This has been one of the most successful incentives across the nation. Okay, so what's in this year's budget? I think I've gone through this a lot too, but I'm going to just highlight some of it. First of all, there's the targeted inflationary increase, 1.7%. What that does is it brings $55 million into the system, $55 million. And also the minimum wage, another $7 million into the system. The governor has, since she's been governor, given over almost 14.5% of either COLAs or targeted inflationary increases over those years. That's incredible, one every year. When before that, we all know, there were years where no inflationary increases occurred. So this is a significant investment, and again, a significant investment in the workforce. We have a first responder behavioral health center of excellence, which we're partnering with OASIS. This is going to ensure that any law enforcement or area that law enforcement, fire department, they want a peer-to-peer program, they can get the technical assistance to be able to develop that peer response program. That's very, very exciting. The joint licensure. This is in the legislature. We've been working on this probably for quite a while, maybe a little bit too long, but now it's here. This would be one license that would provide intensive integrated care, mental health and substance use. Very exciting. Hopefully it will get through the legislature, and the regulations are ready to go as soon as it gets through the legislature. We have $65 million for the residential programs. This is to strengthen our currently existing CRSROs and our currently existing scatter site apartments. While we love adding new housing, you've got to make sure that you can also strengthen and make sure that the existing housing remains strong. We have an expansion of youth safe spaces, 2 this year to add to the already 8, 10 across the state. I've mentioned the $1.8 million for the LGBTQ youth crisis line. Partnership with our tribal nations. These will give dollars to each tribal nation to have a youth program that is focused on their tribal culture and helps youth to thrive in their community. And this will be available to all the tribal nations for them to use as they see fit. Schools of Distinction, awarding schools a small stipend to thank them for becoming, for doing great work in supporting mental health. And then we're going to have a roadmap for kids on evidence-based practices, so critical for youth. So children youth highlights, just to let you know that we are implementing the settlement status for intensive services for youth. Basically, this has been funded for the first year and a half of outreach and planning. And that's going to be very exciting. Many of you will be involved in the planning that will work to redesign and improve how we coordinate. We have many of the services, but we need to have the coordination and the integration across agencies and across services for our youth with high needs. So this is very exciting, and the redesign is beginning now as we speak. Healthy Steps has been expanded significantly and will reach over 300,000 families eventually. We're growing our school mental health clinics. We have Youth Act teams, which is incredible, and we have home-based crisis intervention services that will serve over 3,000 individuals a year. Youth Act, for all these things, we are gathering data on outcomes. And so just to highlight Youth Act, which has been around a little bit longer, that the outcomes so far have shown a significant decrease in risk behaviors, such as suicide risk, danger to others, and problematic social behavior. And the vast majority of the kids on Youth Act are with their families. So this is really exciting. We're going to have similar outcomes that we're going to be measuring for all the services we're providing. But Youth Act so far has been very successful. And we've heard across the state that this has helped with emergency rooms. Having access to Youth Act has decreased use in emergency rooms and has enabled youth to stay with their families and be successful in the community, which is really a goal. Highlights of some select initiatives. I just want to highlight SOS because of some of the, there's been tremendous, as you know, in the media about the homeless on the streets, especially in this cold spell that we've had across the state. And it's programs like Safe Option Supports that's making a difference for those individuals with serious mental illness who were homeless on the streets and in the subways. Basically, we have in New York City moved almost 1,000 individuals into permanent housing. That is not going to a shelter or a safe haven or a bed in a particular homeless shelter in the city. This is getting people the housing that they have the opportunity, and over 80, I think it's, if we keep track of it, close to almost 90% stay in that housing. So it works. Safe Option Support teams work. Why? Because they engage people, they stay with people, they help them through the transition, and can help individuals, some of whom have been on the streets for decades, now move into housing and connect sometimes with them. Sometimes they reconnect with their families, they connect with services, they begin to see a different life than living on the streets. Very exciting. It can work. I think it takes time and it's a process, but it's beginning to see change throughout the state. And it's been expanded to rest of state. And rest of state, almost 700 permanent housing placements. And this is happening right in Albany. It's happening all across the state, that we are helping individuals get off those streets. Now, this is a big number of people, so it's going to take time, but these teams are there, they're continuing to work, and they are linked to a housing first model, which enables them to get quickly into housing when it's appropriate, when they're ready, when they are ready. Not when we are ready, but when they are ready. And so that has made a huge impact on this population. So this is an area that we have been, governors invested in and having great success. The inset teams. These are the peer-led, designed teams that work with individuals with very serious issues in terms of being successful and thriving in the community. We have 6 teams now. They're serving over 350 people, which is tremendous. And they set up a wonderful array of life goals where they expect what that person wants and what that person is looking to get from the experience on the inset teams. And they are monitoring that. And these are reporting that milestones are being met over time. And there's a whole presentation that can be made here of the kind of work that's happening very successfully and doing a great job. The transition to home unit, I just wanted to mention, this is a hospital time for someone who was on the streets, but really they had the most severe challenges. Often they have serious medical problems. They can stay with us at the Manhattan Psychiatric Center in a special unit for up to a year. And some of them start with us involuntarily. The vast majority stay with us on a voluntary basis until they're ready to leave. And when they leave, they get housing and all the support services that they need. And the unit works with them on their wishes, their desires, where they want to live, what they want for themselves, their hopes, aspirations, and dreams. And that's what makes a huge difference. These have been, again, some of the individuals who have been the most disconnected. And when you look at the outcomes, 60% remain in permanent housing. That's impressive. And 76%, even though some of them have gone back to living on the streets, have stayed connected to us and we're always available to help them get back into housing if they're not there. It's long-term work, incredibly slow, successful work. And those individuals, I could give you lots of anecdotes of how well they've done, but some of them have reconnected with families they haven't seen for years. And family members who've been looking for them now know where they are and are there to work with them, to be supportive of them. So again, tremendous work with this unit and with other with other units across the city who also work with these populations. Inpatient beds, we have increased. They are more available. There has been over the past year a slight increase in inpatient admissions, which we would expect. And we are doing tremendous work with those individuals who need inpatient admission, that when they leave, they get all the services that they need. And this is the Hospital Community Office of Hospital and Community Connections, and they are doing some great work. I won't go into all the details here, but it included changing regulations. It included saying hospitals had to pay attention to complex needs. It includes connections through something called our critical time intervention teams, which will work specifically with individuals when they leave hospitals and emergency rooms who need that assistance. It includes peer bridgers who work with individuals leaving emergency rooms. So it's changing regulations and responsibilities, but it's also providing services. And this partnership between hospitals and community services is critical. And we are meeting across the state to ensure that that partnership is real, and a real sense of accountability on our system's part to make sure that individuals get the services they need. And sadly, often people who have some tragic outcomes are because they've fallen between the cracks. What we're trying to do here is not have crack anymore, to always have available for individuals who need that kind of intensive work services that they need and can do well with. So this is growing. I think almost all the teams now have been funded. There were 50 critical time intervention teams across the state. I think almost all of them have now been funded and are beginning to open up. So I think you're going to begin to see that between that and the changes in the regulations, you're going to begin to see a difference in what happens when individuals of high need come to emergency rooms or leave our inpatient services in the community. So these are just the teams and where they are, the peer bridger program, etc. And then just a plug here for all the incredible housing that we have in New York State. This is just unbelievable relative to what most states experience. 51,000 units and 6,500 more in the pipeline. These units it's still not enough supported housing, but it is an incredible amount, and it's really serving so many individuals, and we're going to keep growing it. This is just an infographic of all the housing, how it fits, where it comes from. I'm not going to go through it, but it kind of speaks to the intensity of the way the housing is developed. There's housing first. There's our CRSROs, which are the more intensive supported housing. We also have some apartment treatment programs for individuals to learn how to do well and then move into other kinds of housing. So housing that fits the individual, but also gets you into permanent housing. And so this is very exciting and basically will continue to grow across New York State. I mentioned before some of the placement issues, so we keep fighting that. We keep working real hard to make sure that communities understand just how successful this housing is and how it is really a plus in their community, not a minus. Forensic system highlights just a few things to show that, again, individuals who sadly have gotten involved in the criminal justice system. One of the big things here is mental health court navigators, which are now across the state in counties and in the helping individuals who come to the court get diverted into services rather than jails and prisons. The mental health court navigators will be looking at the outcomes for that, but so far that we've been hearing good things, and the counties have been very pleased. The judges have been very pleased. There's tremendous growth that's going to be happening with the mental health court expansion as well. So individuals can go to a mental health court if they have a mental health issue versus the general court and be connected to services and perhaps diverted from any kind of jail or prison involvement. We also know that there is a need for individuals who sadly have gotten involved in the criminal justice system to and are not yet at the time that they are first arrested or in jail, are not competent to stand trial. And to be able to expand those forensic beds is a major initiative, and we will be expanding those significantly, including 100 beds in Kirby and Manhattan, and also expansions in other parts of the state of Rochester and Mid-Hudson as well. So the main effort here is of diversion, protection, keeping people out. But when you do, and sadly end up in the criminal justice system, to make sure that we have the capacity to serve people well. Just a brief look at our comprehensive crisis system, which has been being built over the past 5 to 6 years. We have the 988, we have mobile crisis teams, we have crisis stabilization centers. We've had a little trouble getting these up and started, but they are growing. We will have increasing numbers over the next couple of years. One of the problems there has been siting, but and then crisis, residential crisis, and intensive crisis residence and children's crisis residences. This is building a system of not just 911, but of all the crisis services that are needed. The one thing that was a bit lacking in terms of a statewide approach before was the work of that immediate call to 911. And how does 911 interface with 988? And how do you increase a behavioral health-led response into the community? And that's what's coming with pilots, which we have recently awarded, one in a suburban, one in a rural, and one in a urban area, to get a model that we can use to expand across the state. This was in last year's budget. And also in last year's budget were the dollars for a technical assistance center, which we have up and running. And we have an advisory board made of individuals who with lived experience, as well as individuals who've done a lot of crisis work, to be involved in advising us in that technical assistance center. That will be available in addition to the pilots on the health-led response. That will be available for any a county or area in the state that would like some technical assistance in how to improve the connection between 988 and 911 and begin to develop a health-led response. So this is very exciting. And this is the, in addition to all the other crisis work, this is a really solid effort to make sure that we have this opportunity in New York to have true health-led responses to a behavioral health crisis. And this is all in conjunction with OASAS, so that it's a mutual together, working together to ensure that this service is available. So this is very exciting, and it will be moving forward this year. We're very excited to see what these pilots, how they will look. And we were also excited to be available through the Technical Assistance Center for assistance statewide. Now, just briefly, what we're doing on the federal actions, just so as a quick update, there is the funding for the LGBTQ line. We are partnering, many people have been asking, well, what about these upcoming changes in Medicaid? We're working very closely with the Department of Health. That includes what will be the eligibility criteria or the exemption criteria from some of the work requirements. We're working with them on what what the definition of someone with mental illness would be that would be an exemption going forward in terms of the work requirements. So there's a lot of work going on. We still do not have guidance from the federal government. So we're doing what we think will be best for our system, but that may shift when we get the guidance from the federal government. But this work is going on. Also, we're working with the GOH on how to be sure to be able to get the word out to individuals when they need to recertify for Medicaid. We're also working for a way to be able to find that out through psyches, so people can know when their Medicaid, when Medicaid needs to be re-upped, because it'll be every 6 months, and also for a way to providers to be able to pull out of psyches who it is that they have to think about for May, June, July, that theirs Medicaid is up. So basically, we will be working very hard to get this done. This is come into play by the end of this year, early next year. But I just want you to be assured that we're working on it. And as soon as we have some plans, and it is still dependent on some of the federal guidance, which we haven't seen yet. We have technical assistance available on fiscal sustainability for anyone. We have that funded. We are already doing it with a number of providers. If providers wish any help on understanding better how to bill, thinking maybe there's some places where they think they could have some better financial stability with billing, etc., please let us know. We're glad to work with you. We already have our quality improvement going on, focused on group treatment. Group treatment is an effective treatment that we haven't used as much. And it can also be an effective financial treatment, as well as effective clinical treatment. So we encourage everyone to be a part of that. If you're not, please let us know when you want to be. You can join and be part of the improvement collaborative on group treatment. We are tracking use. So one of the big things we're looking at is emergency department use for mental health services, which is where we expect will probably go up if their individuals are uninsured. So far, we have not seen much of an uptick, but again, the big uptick will probably come with next year's Medicaid changes, and probably after the essential plan hits in July in a big way, the lack of the essential plan. So, but we're not seeing an uptick yet. We will be working with our clinic providers to keep an eye on uncompensated care coming through. Streamlining the licensing and certification process. We'll be getting those regulations out soon. Telehealth services now are expedited approval outside of operating hours. You don't have to be on site. Exploring PROS satellites as a way to make help individuals get employment, but also a way for them to be involved in something which is pre-employment, which hopefully will again be an exemption from the Medicaid responsibilities with the able-bodied individuals. Integrated licensure, a big issue. If we can get this through this legislature, I think this will be really help providers who are providing integrated care to be less burdened by regulations, by site visits, everything else. And it also enable good quality integrated care. We are constantly monitoring the HUD advisories and the SAMHSA activities. Some of the good news here is that the block grants did go through. We have a slight decrease, well, not slight. So we get about $50 million in the block grant. We're down about $1 million this year. That can be dealt with. That can be dealt with. But the important thing is that we got a large amount in the block grants. The block grants have gone out to the states, which is really good. And there's a lot of anxiety about that. Those grants that were stopped, as far as we know, we have not heard anything yet, whether that will come back. There was a tremendous push to stop, though, to make sure that those grants were not stopped, and for the SAMHSA to retract it. That push will continue at a legislative level, at the federal government, and our lobbying for that, etc. SAMHSA is beginning to rehire a little bit people, so they may be able to be a little more forceful to some extent in what's going on. We are monitoring the HUD advisories. So far, we have not heard. They were supposed to give some further information mid-January. At this point, no news is good news. So we haven't heard. There is somewhat of a push at the federal level, whether it will be successful or not, to change that 30% to 60%. Remember, one of the HUD requirements was that only 30% could be permanent housing. There is several groups pushing very hard at the federal level to at least make that 60% permanent housing. That would be a big difference for us. So we don't know if that'll go through, but that is happening. We have heard that there has only been a slight decrease in the proposed funding for the National Institutes of Mental Health. That's important because if we're going to move forward, it's important that research continue in mental health, and especially in mental health. Most of the research is funded by the feds. There's not a lot of private funding for mental health research. So the fact that that might not be cut is something that we're hopeful for, or not be cut significantly. And then the CCBHCs, as far as we know, are continuing to move forward with funding and with SPA amendments and with support from the federal government. There seems to be, at least at this point, bipartisan support for the CCBHCs. So again, and then finally, we will continue to work very closely on all the loan repayment programs. They will continue to flow for the workforce. And we will also work on our mental health associate. And we are working very closely with a number of universities for the pipeline of individuals to be able to come. You know, the fellowship program, scholarship program that we had with SUNY and CUNY, that was funded by ARPA funds, provided for 600 individuals to come into the mental health field. So these scholarship programs, these connections to universities work. Is making sure that we get, when we have the dollars, that we get them out there, and also that we continue to have connections with various universities to connect to our provider system for people to get experience in mental health, so that they then think that that might be an exciting career choice. And then lastly, I just want to end with all the hard work that all of you have done, and all the support from the governor. I just like to kind of brag for a minute about that New York was ranked #1 in mental health by Mental Health America. Not a small feat, because it includes 17 measures, many of which were access to care, one which included youth in schools having suicidal ideation. So these were very meaningful measures that we used, and when you added them all up, we did better in some than others, but overall we were #1 across the nation. And I think that that's a huge thank you to all of you, because none of this would have been possible without you. So I just want to, let me see, end there. I think I can figure out how to stop sharing. And just emphasize again that in talking about the budget, and in talking about dollars, and talking about this governor's commitment to all those things that are important to families across New York State and to mental health, has just been incredible. So I think we can look forward to, I think, what can be another good year, hopefully, for mental health. Still a long way to go, but many things that are moving in a really positive direction going forward, despite some of the challenges that I know we're going to be facing, especially some from the federal government. So I'll stop there. And oops, I think I talked too long again. I can do this when I get started. So if there's any quick questions, Erica, anything?
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a few quick questions and a few comments saying this was very informative. So thank you for that overview. The first is, will we receive these slides? Yes, I'm going to send these slides out for your reference to all attendees. The next question from Nancy was asking about the teen mental health first aid to high schoolers. Will there be an RFP release to provide this, or is this funding going through another state department? And that's a great question. This funding is through the Office of Mental Health, and high schools won't need to apply to an RFP. Any high school that is interested in the teen mental health first aid will be able to receive that training, and it's through a vendor that we work with. So I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
It should be very easy to have happen. We're going to try to make this very easy to get out there so that people can get it started. Yeah, thanks, Erica.
Thank you. The next question is related to the integrated license. Thank you, Patrick. Will the joint licensure only apply to CCBHC clinics, or will it be available for non-CCBHC clinics to apply for?
It's available to all clinics. It will be available to clinics. I mean, they have to meet certain levels of service, but yes, it will be available across the system.
Thank you. And then Jeffrey asked regarding when you were talking about the federal actions and the Medicaid work requirements for the expansion population, and there's an exclusion criteria. Will OMH work with OASAS as we're developing those definitions of exclusion criteria? And that's a great suggestion, Jeffrey.
Yes, yes. I think OASAS, we're working together with DOH. Yep. Yeah, and it's very important that we do that. You know, OASAS, at least what the feds have said, there seems to be some differences, but both of us are working with DOH on getting the information out and making it straightforward.
Thank you. And we have a question from Michael, which I'll end with this one. And it sounds like a question in the form of a suggestion. So I'll read what Michael said. In regard to both access to childcare, which was one thing we covered, and regard to access to mental health services, will the neighborhoods that need the services the most, that have historically lacked access, be the first to get the funding? Thinking about equity and accessibility. Thank you, Michael.
I think I'm not as quite as up on this on the childcare side, but I'm pretty sure, especially from what I've heard in New York City, that they are targeting specific neighborhoods that feel for some of the expansion dollars. Remember, I mentioned 2Care and that kind of thing. And similarly, the special targets that the governor has put in for those counties were chosen because of the need of those counties. I think it was Broome County and a few others on the rest of state. So yes, I think that it is important to make sure that the services are available where they're needed. And I think that that will happen. And similarly, when we put out our RFPs and we look at planning for services across the state, whatever they are, we look at all the data that shows where we have services, where we don't, which communities have gaps, which communities are not involved, and that determines some of the locations that we say we want to serve. We want, for example, to have an ACT team in this particular area of the state, in this particular county, because we know that we don't have services there. With the prevention work that we're doing, also, we're doing tremendous work based on areas where we know individuals, for example, are not accessing care. So we're out there doing specialized prevention work in those areas to help people, communities, to get community workers, to get communities working to be able to access the care. Because sometimes we even have the care there, but people don't feel comfortable accessing it without working with those communities. So yes, we are targeting areas that we feel are the most need.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Okay, I think we're over time, so I know everybody's so busy, and I wish I could have seen all your faces, but I'm glad. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And I think hopefully as we go through this year and we face the challenges ahead, I think we stick together and we do it together, we'll be okay. So thank you all for coming today, and have a great rest of the day.